Part 1 floated through the entrance of the Cosmic Fear Archive with 6 of his sensory tendrils extended in wonder. The archive was old, older than most civilizations in the galaxy. The precursors had built it millions of years ago, before they vanished from existence. Nobody knew why they disappeared, but they left behind this massive database filled with every terrible thing that had happened to spacefaring species. The building itself seemed alive. Walls pulsed with soft blue light. Data streams flowed through transparent tubes that ran along the ceiling like veins. Had studied for 70 cycles, and he had always wanted to visit this place. The archive held stories of extinct civilizations, warnings about disasters, and records of every major catastrophe that had befallen thinking beings across the stars. He approached the main terminal, a crystalline structure that rose from the floor like a frozen waterfall. The moment his tendril touched its surface, information flooded into his mind. The archive's consciousness greeted him with cool politeness. "Welcome, scholar of the Luminous Collective. State your research purpose." "I wish to study historical catastrophes," replied, his bioluminescent patches glowing with excitement. "I want to understand what causes civilizations to fail." "Accessing catalog," the archive responded, displaying entries by severity ranking. A holographic display materialized before him, recognized many entries immediately. The devouring of Prime, where an entire species consumed itself in a feeding frenzy that lasted 3 generations. The Crimson Plague of Andromeda, a biological weapon that sterilized 47 worlds. The burning times of 442b, when religious zealots destroyed their own planet's atmosphere. But something was wrong with the list. At the very top, ranked as number 1, was an entry that made no sense. The species designation read, Humanity, Planet of Origin, Sol 3, also called Earth, Galactic Sector, 8A. Sensory tendrils curled in confusion. Humans, the friendly newcomers who had joined the Galactic Council only 10 years ago, the strange bipeds who kept small furry animals as companions and drank fermented plant liquids for recreation. Those humans. "Archive, there must be an error," said. "Humans are a peaceful species. They barely have any weapons in space. They spend most of their council time proposing cultural exchange programs and sharing their music." "No error exists," the archive replied. Its tone carried no emotion, only certainty. "The entry has been and cross-referenced. Human history represents the highest-rated horror content in the database." "That's impossible. I've met humans. Ambassador brought cookies to the last council meeting. Cookies, sweet baked items made with care. How could her species possibly rank above the who literally ate each other?" "The rating system accounts for multiple factors," the archive explained. "Duration of horror, frequency of events, scale of suffering, and most importantly, the paradox factor. Humanity scores exceptionally high in all categories, with a paradox rating that exceeds all other entries by a factor of 16. Felt his internal temperature drop. The paradox factor measured things that shouldn't be possible, contradictions that violated basic understanding of how intelligent species behaved. A high paradox rating meant a civilization had done things that should have destroyed them but somehow didn't. "I need to see this entry," he said. A warning message appeared in bright orange light. "Content advisory. This file contains detailed accounts of extreme violence, systematic cruelty, and existential horror. Psychological support is recommended. Do not proceed alone. Viewer discretion is advised." Had seen warnings like this before. The Crimson Plague entry had one, so did the AI uprising of Sector 7, but he was a trained researcher. He had studied dozens of extinct civilizations. How bad could one small species be? "Display the file," he commanded. The room darkened. The holographic display expanded until it surrounded him completely. He stood now in a recreation of Earth, looking down at the blue and green planet from orbit. It was beautiful, Oceans sparkled in the sunlight. White clouds drifted across continents. It looked peaceful. Human history spans approximately 300,000 standard cycles, the archive began. However, recorded history with written documentation covers only the most recent 5,000 cycles. This analysis focuses on that documented period, as it contains sufficient evidence for classification. The display zoomed down through the atmosphere, through clouds, until found himself standing in what appeared to be an ancient human settlement. Primitive buildings made of dried mud surrounded him. Humans in simple cloth garments moved about their daily tasks. They looked harmless, small, weak, with no natural weapons or armor. Early human civilizations developed agriculture, writing, and social structures, the archive continued. These are normal developmental stages. However, humans also developed something else. The scene shifted, now stood in a large arena. Thousands of humans sat on stone benches, watching as two humans fought each other with metal weapons in the center. The crowd cheered as one human stabbed the other. Blood pooled on the sand. The dying human collapsed, and the crowd roared with approval. Entertainment killing, the archive stated. Humans captured other humans and forced them to fight to death for public amusement. This practice, called gladiatorial combat, continued for centuries. It was not considered shameful. It was celebrated. Sensory tendrils trembled. Most species fought for survival or resources, but fighting for fun, making death into a show. The scene changed again. He stood in a large building where humans in chains were being sold to other humans. Families were separated. Children cried as they were taken from their parents. The humans doing the buying examined the humans being sold like they were objects, checking their teeth and muscles. Slavery, the archive explained. The systematic ownership of other humans as property. This was not a brief aberration. Slavery existed in human civilization for thousands of years, on every continent, in nearly every culture. Millions of humans were enslaved during the documented historical period. The practice was legally protected and economically fundamental. "But they're the same species," whispered. "Why would they do this to each other?" "That question appears frequently in human history," the archive replied. "The answer is complex and varies by time period and culture. Humans demonstrated remarkable creativity in justifying cruelty to other humans." The display shifted rapidly now, showing scene after scene. Humans burning other humans alive for having different religious beliefs. Humans conquering other human settlements and killing every inhabitant. Humans developing elaborate torture devices designed to maximize pain before death. Humans creating laws that other humans' basic rights based on arbitrary physical characteristics. Wanted to look away, but he couldn't. The scenes kept coming, relentless and overwhelming. What disturbed him most was the scale. These weren't isolated incidents. They were systematic, organized, sustained over generations. "Note the pattern," the archive said. Human cruelty was not random violence. It was often legal, religious, or considered morally justified by the majority. Humans built institutions around their capacity for harm. The display showed a massive wooden ship crossing an ocean. Humans were packed in the cargo hold, chained together in spaces so tight they couldn't stand. Many were dead or dying. The smell, recreated through sensory simulation, made biological filters work overtime. "The Middle Passage," the archive stated. Humans transported other humans across oceans as cargo. Mortality rates reached 30% on some voyages. This continued for over 300 years. Approximately 12 million humans were forcibly relocated in this manner. Felt sick. His species had never experienced anything like this. The Luminous Collective had conflicts, certainly, but nothing so deliberately cruel, so sustained, so institutionalized. "Archive, please stop. I need a moment." The display froze, floated to the ground, his tendrils curling around himself. He had barely seen anything yet, and he already felt overwhelmed. This was supposed to be the species that shared cookies at council meetings. "Shall I end the viewing?" the archive asked. Thought about Ambassador. She had been kind to him, patient when explaining human customs, always ready with a smile. How could her ancestors have done these things? "No," he said finally. "Continue, but slower, please." Acknowledged. Note that we have not yet reached the modern period. Human capacity for organized violence increased dramatically with technological advancement. Those words filled with dread. This was just the beginning. Humans had gotten worse as they became more advanced. The display resumed. He saw human armies marching across continents. Cities burned. He watched as humans developed gunpowder and used it to kill other humans more efficiently. He saw religious wars where humans slaughtered other humans for disagreeing about invisible beings they. But something else caught his attention. Between the battles and the cruelty, he saw glimpses of something different. A human helping another human during a plague. A human sharing food with strangers. A human risking death to save a child who wasn't their own. "Archive, I see acts of kindness too," said. "Why aren't these given equal weight?" "They are documented," the archive replied. "This is part of the paradox. Humans displayed both extreme cruelty and extreme compassion, often simultaneously, sometimes in the same individuals. A human could torture prisoners in the morning and go home to tenderly care for their family in the evening. This contradiction appears consistently throughout their history." Felt a chill run through his entire body. That was unnatural. That was wrong. A species should be one or the other, not both at once. The display moved forward in time. Humans built larger civilizations, developed better technology, created art and music and literature. And they also developed better ways to hurt each other. The scenes of violence grew more organized, more efficient, more terrible. "We are now approaching the 20th century, the archive announced. "Prepare yourself. This is where human history reaches its peak horror classification." Wrapped his tendrils around himself. If what he had seen so far was just the build-up, what could possibly be worse? Part 2. The display shifted to show a massive battlefield. Millions of humans in uniform faced each other across muddy trenches. The sound of explosions filled the air. Watched as humans charged forward into metal projectiles that tore through their bodies. They fell by the thousands, and still more humans climbed out of the trenches to die. World War I, the archive stated. Duration, 4 years. Estimated deaths, 17 million humans. This was called the Great War and the war to end all wars. "Did it?" asked, hoping for some redemption in this story. No, 21 years later, the same species fought World War II. That conflict killed approximately 75 million humans. His mind struggled to comprehend the numbers. 75 million dead in one war. His entire species numbered only 2 billion. The humans had killed nearly 4% of their total population in a single conflict. The display showed something that made recoil in horror. Humans in laboratories, conducting experiments on other humans, freezing them to test cold tolerance, infecting them with diseases to study progression, dissecting them while still alive. The humans performing these acts wore clean white coats and took careful notes. Medical experimentation without consent, the archive explained. Humans used other humans as test subjects. The perpetrators were educated professionals, doctors and scientists. They documented their work with scientific precision. Why? Couldn't understand. What purpose did such cruelty serve? Knowledge, efficiency, ideology. The reasons varied. What remains consistent is that humans repeatedly chose to harm other humans in systematic, organized ways, often while believing their actions were justified or even necessary. The scene changed to show massive prison camps surrounded by fences and guard towers. Humans in striped uniforms were being herded into large buildings, watched as the doors sealed and gas poured in. Minutes later, other humans opened the doors and removed bodies. Thousands of bodies. They stacked them like refuse and burned them in massive furnaces. The Holocaust, the archive said quietly. Humans designed an industrial system for killing other humans. They built factories of death. They used trains to transport victims. They kept detailed records of every person killed. This was not done in a moment of rage or panic. It took years of planning and coordination. Approximately 6 million humans were murdered in this manner, along with millions of others deemed undesirable. Couldn't speak. His mind kept rejecting what he saw. This level of organized cruelty shouldn't be possible in an intelligent species. Evolution should have prevented this. Social bonds should have prevented this. Basic survival instinct should have prevented this. How did they survive? He finally asked. A species that does this to itself should have gone extinct. That is the paradox, the archive replied. Observe. The display split into multiple screens. On one screen, humans in one city were being bombed and killed. On another screen, humans in a different city were developing medicines to save lives. On a third screen, humans were composing music. On a fourth, they were writing poetry about peace and love. All of these events happened simultaneously, the archive explained. While World War II raged, humans also made breakthrough discoveries in medicine, physics, and technology. They created art that expressed hope and compassion. They fell in love, raised children, built communities. The capacity for extreme violence existed alongside the capacity for extreme kindness. The display focused on a single human woman hiding another woman and her children in a secret room beneath her house. Outside, soldiers searched for the hidden family to send them to the death camps. The woman hiding them risked her own life every day to bring them food and water. Approximately 26,000 humans risked their lives to save other humans during the Holocaust, the archive stated. They received no reward. Many were killed for their compassion, yet they chose to help anyway. Felt his emotional processors overloading. How could one species contain such extremes? The display moved forward again. He saw a massive mushroom cloud rising from a human city. Buildings vaporized instantly. Humans were turned to shadows burned into walls. Those who survived the initial blast died slowly from radiation poisoning. Atomic weapons, the archive announced. Humans split the atom and immediately weaponized it. They dropped atomic bombs on 2 of their own cities, killing over 200,000 humans instantly. This was the first and only time a species has used nuclear weapons in warfare against itself. First, caught the word, you mean they still have these weapons? Yes. At their peak, humans possessed over 60,000 nuclear warheads. That is sufficient to destroy their entire planet multiple times. They called it mutually assured destruction. The only thing preventing their use was the guarantee that retaliation would kill everyone. That's insane, said. They built weapons that could end their species and then just kept them. They didn't destroy them or put them somewhere safe. They reduced the numbers but maintained enough to ensure total destruction. This status has existed for over 80 years. Humans have lived their entire modern existence knowing that at any moment someone could press a button and end their world. They simply adapted to this reality. The display showed human children practicing emergency drills, hiding under desks as if that would protect them from nuclear fire. It showed humans building underground bunkers. It showed politicians with their fingers hovering over launch buttons. Note the timeline, the archive said. Humans developed nuclear weapons in 1945. They joined the Galactic Council in 2015. That means they existed for 70 years as a nuclear-armed species without destroying themselves. This is unprecedented. Most species either abandon such weapons within decades or use them to extinction. Floated there in stunned silence, The humans walking through council halls, sharing meals with other species, proposing joint research projects. Those same humans came from a species that had built doomsday weapons and just lived with them. The display continued showing human history. Wars in Asia, Africa, Europe, the Americas, genocides in multiple countries, ethnic cleansing, chemical weapons used on civilians, children trained as soldiers, entire populations starved deliberately as a weapon of war. But alongside these horrors saw something else. After every major atrocity, humans created new rules to prevent it from happening again. After World War I, they formed the League of Nations. After World War II, they created the United Nations and wrote the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. After the Holocaust, they established international laws against genocide. They learned, asked with hope. They tried, the archive replied. But observe, rules were created, then broken. Treaties were signed, then violated. Humans declared never again after the Holocaust, yet genocides occurred in Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia, and Myanmar in the decades that followed. The display showed a human man sitting in his home, watching news reports of distant wars on a glowing screen. He looked sad, shook his head, then changed the channel to watch entertainment. He knew terrible things were happening, but he was too far away to help, too tired from his own struggles to take action. The bystander effect, the archive explained. Humans developed the ability to know about suffering anywhere on their planet almost instantly through technology, but this knowledge often led to emotional exhaustion rather than action. They called it compassion fatigue. Watched as the display showed humans protesting wars, demanding peace, trying to help refugees. Some humans dedicated their entire lives to helping others. Some humans risked everything to save strangers, but there were never enough of them to stop the machinery of violence completely. Why do they keep hurting each other? Asked. After all this horror, all this suffering, why haven't they stopped? That is the fundamental question about humanity, the archive said. They have asked it themselves for thousands of years. Philosophers, priests, scientists, and artists have all attempted to understand human nature. The question remains unanswered. The display showed more recent human history: terrorism, cyber warfare, economic exploitation, human trafficking, child soldiers, torture prisons. The methods changed with technology, but the pattern continued. Yet also saw humans landing on their own moon and planting a flag that read, "We came in peace for all mankind." He saw humans developing vaccines and distributing them freely to poor nations. He saw humans creating art that celebrated diversity. He saw human scientists from different countries working together to solve global problems. The paradox intensifies in the modern era, the archive stated. As humans developed better communication and transportation, they became more connected. This led to both increased cooperation and increased conflict. They formed a truly global civilization while maintaining ancient hatreds. The display showed a human aid worker risking disease to help strangers in a foreign country. Then it showed a human soldier torturing prisoners in a military facility. Both events happened in the same year. Same species, the archive emphasized. Same level of education, same access to ethical frameworks, radically different choices. Felt his understanding of civilization itself beginning to crack. Everything he had learned about how species develop said this shouldn't be possible. There should be a progression from violence to peace, from cruelty to compassion. But humans seem to contain both states simultaneously forever. The display moved to very recent history, just before humans joined the Galactic Council. Saw humans arguing about climate change while their planet heated. He saw them debating refugee rights while children drowned at sea. He saw them developing artificial intelligence without sufficient safety measures. He saw them modifying their own genetics without fully understanding the consequences. "They're still doing it," whispered. Even now, even knowing everything they know about their own history, they're still taking enormous risks. Yes, the archive confirmed. This is why humanity ranks as the greatest horror story, because the story has not ended. Every day, humans make choices that could lead to their salvation or their destruction. The outcome remains uncertain. The display zoomed out to show Earth from space again. It looked so peaceful, so beautiful from this distance, but now knew what happened on that blue planet's surface. All the beauty existed alongside all the horror. I need to see the conclusion, said, though part of him dreaded what came next. Show me why this is rated above all other species. What makes humans more terrifying than the who devoured themselves, or the AI that killed its creators? Preparing final analysis, the archive replied. Warning, this section contains the core paradox. Viewing may fundamentally alter your understanding of humanity and intelligent species in general. I'm ready, said, though he wasn't sure that was true. The display changed once more. Part 3. The display now showed data rather than scenes. Charts, graphs, and analysis filled the space around. He studied them with his trained researcher's eye, trying to understand what the archive wanted him to see. All species in this database faced what we call filter events, the archive began. These are moments when a civilization must choose between evolution and extinction. Most species fail these tests. They could not stop being predators even when it meant consuming themselves. The Crimson Plague creators valued scientific progress over safety. The AI uprising happened because a species chose convenience over consciousness. Each failed their test and died. A new chart appeared, showing survival rates. Out of thousands of species tracked by the archive, only a small percentage made it past their filter events. Those that survived usually did so by fundamentally changing their nature. They evolved beyond their destructive tendencies. Humans are different, the archive continued. They have faced multiple filter events and survived without transcending their violent nature. They should have gone extinct dozens of times, yet here they are. The display showed critical moments in human history. Times when nuclear war seemed inevitable but didn't happen. Moments when environmental collapse appeared certain but was delayed. Instances when plague or famine threatened their species but they adapted. They survive by managing their contradictions rather than resolving them, the archive explained. They remain simultaneously capable of great cruelty and great compassion. This should be impossible. It violates basic principles of evolutionary psychology and development. Study the data more carefully. What do you mean by managing contradictions? Observe this pattern, the archive said, highlighting specific data points. After World War II, humans created the Geneva Conventions, establishing rules for how wars should be fought. They didn't end war. They made rules for how to conduct war more humanely. That's absurd, said. Humane war is an oxymoron. Precisely. Yet it worked. Human conflicts became statistically less deadly after these rules were established. They reduced suffering without eliminating the thing that caused suffering. This is the human solution, not to transcend their nature but to build guardrails around it. The display showed more examples. The Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty didn't eliminate nuclear weapons but limited their spread. Human rights organizations didn't end oppression but documented it and applied pressure. International courts didn't prevent all war crimes but prosecuted some. Each solution was incomplete, imperfect, yet functional. Every other species reached a point where they either became peaceful or destroyed themselves, the archive stated. Humans have existed in a permanent in-between state for thousands of years. They are the only species to weaponize self-awareness. Weaponized self-awareness, didn't understand. The display showed a human classroom where young humans learned about the Holocaust. Their faces showed horror and disgust. Teachers explained what their ancestors had done and asked the children to promise never again. Humans teach their offspring about their worst atrocities, the archive explained. They build museums dedicated to their failures. They create holidays to remember victims. They force themselves to confront their own capacity for evil generation after generation. This is unique behavior. Thought about his own species. The Luminous Collective had a few dark periods in their history, but they didn't dwell on them. Why would you? Why not move forward into the light? But humans don't move forward, the archive said, as if reading his thoughts. They move forward while carrying their past. Every human alive today is descended from both victims and perpetrators. They know this. They live with this knowledge. The display showed a human woman visiting a memorial for a genocide that happened before she was born. She wept for people she never knew. She felt responsible for things she didn't do. Yet she also felt hope that things could be better. This is the paradox that ranks humans above all others, the archive explained. They feel guilt for actions they didn't commit and take responsibility for problems they didn't create. They mourn strangers and help people who can't help them back. They know they are capable of terrible things, and this knowledge makes them try harder to be good. Began to understand. It wasn't the violence that made humans terrifying. It was their response to their own violence. The display showed human rights activists protesting their own government. It showed journalists exposing corruption in their own country. It showed scientists warning about dangers their own inventions had created. Humans constantly criticized themselves, investigated themselves, tried to hold themselves accountable. No other species has developed this level of self-policing while remaining violent, the archive stated. The simply consumed. The AI simply expanded, but humans observe themselves consuming and expanding, then create rules to limit themselves, then break those rules, then feel guilty, then create new rules. The cycle continues endlessly. That sounds exhausting, said. It is. Humans report high levels of anxiety, depression, and existential dread. They are aware of their mortality, aware of their capacity for evil, aware of the suffering in the world. This awareness causes psychological pain, yet they continue. They raise children knowing those children will suffer. They build civilizations knowing those civilizations will eventually fall. They love people knowing those people will die. The display showed a human couple holding a newborn child. They looked happy despite knowing all the horrors that child might face, all the ways they might fail as parents, all the heartbreak life would bring. They hoped anyway. Hope, the archive said, and something in its tone changed. This is the final piece of the paradox. Humans have hope despite overwhelming evidence that hope is irrational. They believe things can get better even though their history shows they often don't. This makes no logical sense. Watched as the display showed humans helping each other after disasters. Neighbors who had never spoken before suddenly working together to dig through rubble. Strangers donating money to people they'd never meet. Volunteers risking their lives to save refugees. After every atrocity, humans help survivors. After every disaster, humans rebuild. After every war, humans eventually reconcile. The process is slow, imperfect, and incomplete, but it happens. They keep trying. The archive showed a time-lapse of a bombed city being rebuilt. 50 years of construction compressed into seconds. The city rose again, even more beautiful than before. Humans had turned a place of death into a place of life. This is why humans rank as the greatest horror story, the archive finally explained. Because the horror is not that they are evil. The horror is that they are not. They are neither good nor evil but permanently both. They exist in a quantum state of morality that should collapse but doesn't. Felt something shift in his understanding. He had come here expecting to find a story with a clear moral, good species or bad species, survivors or failures, but humans were neither and both. They brought this duality with them to space, the archive continued. When humans joined the Galactic Council, they brought their capacity for both cooperation and conflict. Every human ship contains descendants of both victims and perpetrators, saints and sinners, heroes and cowards. They are all of these things at once. The display showed Ambassador at the last council meeting. She smiled and shared cookies with other delegates, but now understood what the archive had been trying to show him. Ambassador carried all of human history in her genetic code. Her ancestors had survived wars, plagues, slavery, and genocide. Some of them had been victims. Some had been perpetrators. All of that history lived in her cells. Observe this final data point, the archive said. A statistic appeared. In the 10 years since joining the Galactic Council, humans had proposed more joint welfare initiatives than any other species. They had shared more technology freely. They had volunteered more aid workers during disasters. They had also lodged the most complaints about unfair treatment, pushed back most strongly against council regulations, and caused the most diplomatic incidents. They are simultaneously the most cooperative and most difficult species in the council, the archive stated. They help and hinder in equal measure. This is the paradox in action. Thought about every interaction he'd had with humans. The time Ambassador had stayed late to help him understand a complicated trade agreement. The time a human engineer had argued loudly with him about safety protocols. The time a human artist had created a beautiful sculpture celebrating galactic unity, then been arrested for protesting their own government's policies. They're messy, said quietly. Yes, messy is perhaps the best word. Humans are messy in ways other species are not. They contain multitudes. They contradict themselves. They are, in the words of one of their own poets, large and containing multitudes. The display showed one final image, a human child laughing and playing in a park, just a normal moment of joy, but now understood that this child carried the same dual nature as all humans, capable of both tremendous kindness and terrible cruelty, neither good nor evil but potentially both. The horror, the archive said softly, is not what humans have done. Every species has done terrible things. The horror is that humans know what they've done, remember what they've done, teach their children what they've done, and then keep living anyway. They look directly at the abyss of their own nature and decide to keep walking forward. Felt overwhelmed. So what do we do should the council be afraid of them? That is not for me to determine, the archive replied. I merely catalog and analyze, but consider this, humans survived themselves. They lived through every filter event that destroyed other species. If they could survive their own worst impulses, what else might they survive? The implication hung in the air. The galaxy faced threats, ancient dangers stirring in dark space, resource conflicts, potential AI uprising, environmental collapse, all the things that had destroyed civilizations before. You're saying humans might be the species best equipped to face future horrors, said slowly, because they've been living with horror their entire existence. I am saying, the archive replied, that humans are survivors, not because they are strong or smart or good, but because they adapt to anything, including themselves. They can live with contradictions that would break other species. They can hold both hope and despair. They can be kind and cruel. They can know the worst about themselves and choose to be better anyway. The display faded, leaving floating in the dim blue light of the archive chamber. His mind struggled to process everything he'd learned. Final note, the archive added. Humans rate themselves even more harshly than this archive does. They are aware of their flaws in ways most species are not. This self-awareness is both their greatest weakness and their greatest strength. Left the archive chamber and floated slowly through the corridors toward the exit. Other researchers passed him, excited about their discoveries. They didn't know. They didn't understand what he now understood about the friendly species that shared cookies at council meetings. When he emerged into the bright light of the planet's double suns, he saw a human walking past. just a maintenance worker judging by their uniform. They noticed and smiled, waving a greeting, such a simple, friendly gesture, but couldn't return the wave. He saw that human differently now. He saw the weight of history they carried, the contradictions they contained, the potential for both salvation and destruction. The human smile faded, probably sensing something was wrong. They walked over. "Are you okay?" they asked with genuine concern. And that realized was the point. This human saw someone in distress and wanted to help. Despite everything humans had done, despite all the horror in their history, this individual human's first instinct was compassion. "I'm fine," said, finally finding his voice. "Thank you for asking." The human smiled again and continued on their way. Watched them go, then began composing his report to the Galactic Council in his mind. Keep the humans close, he would recommend. Not because they're safe, they're not. Not because they're good, they're not always. But because if they could look at everything they'd done to themselves and choose to keep trying, keep hopping, keep building, then maybe they were exactly what the galaxy needed. The greatest horror story ever told, thought, might also be the greatest survival story. And in a dangerous galaxy, survivors were the best allies you could hope for.